When you think about Class C airspace, Charlie airspace, think crowded or congested. And that's because Class C airspace is at airports where the traffic count or passenger count is pretty high. Air traffic control will give you radar service and will sequence you with other traffic to the airport. Now, the way that Class Charlie airspace is shown on an aeronautical chart is with a solid magenta line like this. To enter Class C airspace, you must establish two-way communications with air traffic control. And when you do that, you'll get radar service. You do not have to have a clearance to enter Class C airspace, just two-way radio communications with the controller. Now, do you need any particular equipment to fly in Class C? Well, yes, because in addition to a two-way radio, you must have a transponder with Mode C or altitude reporting capability. It's required both in the Class C airspace and above it. You need the transponder with the Mode C capability in order for air traffic control to be able to give you that radar service. Now, Class C airspace can come in all different sizes and shapes, but there is a kind of a standard size and shape. First of all, the Class C airspace surrounding the primary airport has a surface area that extends out 5 nautical miles from the center of the airport. Now, the surface area goes from the surface to normally 4,000 feet above the airport elevation. But to find the exact height of that surface area, you have to look at the chart. Here, it says it goes from the surface to 4,600 feet MSL. Now, in some cases, that may not be 4,000 feet above the airport elevation. Beyond the surface area, from 5 miles to 10 nautical miles from the primary airport, is the shelf area. And that's because this shelf area normally goes from 1,200 feet above ground level to 4,000 feet above the airport elevation, forming a shelf. And again, the chart will show you the elevations. Here, the base of the shelf area is 2,000 feet MSL, and it goes up to 4,600 feet MSL. Now, outside of that, out here for another 10 miles is what's called the outer area. The outer area is not shown on the chart because it is not mandatory for you to call ATC before you get in the outer area. But this is the area in which you should start calling ATC so that you will have established communications before you get into the marked Class Charlie airspace itself. Now, let's get airborne and take a look at what Class C airspace might look like if we could see it from the air. First of all, you have that surface area, and it starts at the surface, logically enough, and goes to normally 4,000 feet above the airport elevation. And it has a radius of 5 nautical miles from the center of the airport. Next, you have the shelf area. The shelf area normally starts at 1,200 feet above ground level and goes to 4,000 feet above the airport elevation. Not charted is the outer area out here that goes from 10 miles out to 20 miles from the airport. So here is what that giant toadstool in the sky would look like if you could see it from the air. And remember, you can fly above it or under the floor of the shelf area without talking to air traffic control. Now, even though there supposedly is a standard size and shape to Class C airspace, you really can't count on that. And here's a good example of why not. This is Southern California. Here's the Marine Corps Air Station at El Toro. Here's John Wayne Airport at Santa Ana, California. And there's one great big Class C area. Now you say to yourself, Class C? No problem. I'll just climb to above 4,000 feet above the airport and top it out. But here's why that doesn't work in this case. Notice, as we take a close look on the left side of this Class C airspace at John Wayne Orange County Airport, that the airport elevation is 54 feet. So if you go to 4,000 feet above that, it'd be about 4,000 or 4,100 feet. But the top of this Class C airspace is 4,400 feet MSL instead. So you can see that won't work. You can't top it there at 4,000 because the airspace goes up here to 4,400 feet. But hold on a minute. Take a look over to the left a little bit, and when you look at that segment, you can see that the top there goes clear up to 5,400 feet. So you can't just assume that you can go to 4,000 feet above the airport and top Class Charlie airspace out. Not only that, but the size and shape of the Class C airspace is not standard. Because if you take a look at this airspace, there's cutouts. If you take a look over on the right-hand side here, look at this great big cutout for the mountains. So you cannot assume a standard size and shape to Class Charlie airspace. Now let's assume there's a secondary airport inside Class C airspace. Well, here's a good example of that. Here's the primary airport, and here's the secondary airport. Now let's assume that you want to take off from the secondary airport, but you can't contact them on the ground. What can you do? Well, the answer, just like in Class Delta airspace, is establish communications as soon as you can after you take off. Now, here's another case that is similar but a little different, because notice that we have an airport here that would be inside the Class C airspace, except they made a little cutout here. So what should you do when you take off from this airport? You should fly away from the Class Charlie airspace and then establish communications before you enter the Class C airspace. Now, what air traffic control services can you expect in Class C airspace? Well, they will be giving you radar service, and you can expect to be sequenced for your arrival at or departure from the airport. You can also expect some separation services. How much? Well, if you're operating IFR, you're going to get normal IFR separation from other IFR aircraft operating in Class Charlie airspace. If the weather is VFR, there will probably be VFR aircraft in the airspace. You'll be separated from them also, but not to the same standard as for IFR aircraft. However, when you go outside the Class C boundary into that outer area, you may not be separated from all VFR aircraft since they don't have to participate in that outer area. So when you see Class C, Class Charlie airspace, think crowded, think congested. And remember that in addition to a dialogue with air traffic control, you also need to have a transponder.